Athens, spring 406 BC. Spartan flutes are playing. And to the sound of those flutes, the long walls of the greatest naval empire the ancient Mediterranean had ever seen are being torn down, stone by stone, by the very allies Athens had once dominated. 76 years earlier, this same city was ashes, a burnt-out shell on a hill, smoke still rising from what had been the Acropolis. The Persians had walked into Athens and found nothing worth looting. They burned what was left and moved on. Between those two moments, between the ashes and the flutes, Athens invented democracy. It invented philosophy as we understand it. It invented theater. It built a navy that saved Western civilization. It built a temple that would define beauty for 2,500 years. And then it voted to destroy all of it.
I'm Arthur, and today we're reconstructing the most extraordinary 80 years in the life of Athens.
The rise from ash, the intoxicating summit of its power, and the long series of votes by which the citizens of the most creative democracy in history decided, one assembly at a time, to hand their city over to its enemies. This is not the story of a civilization destroyed by its foes. Sparta did not conquer Athens. Athens conquered itself. Sparta was only there to collect the pieces. This is the story of the wooden wall that saved Athens from Persia, and the wall of fear that killed it from within.
To understand the flutes, you need the ashes.
In September 480 BC, the armies of the Persian king Xerxes swept into Attica. The Athenians had already made a calculation no Greek city had ever made before. They evacuated. The old, the women, the children shipped to the island of Salamis, the men of fighting age onto ships. The Persians walked into an empty city. They burned the temples on the Acropolis. They turned the cradle of classical Greece into charcoal. The calculation had been made by one man, Themistocles, an outsider in an aristocratic world with a naval vision. Years earlier, when a vein of silver was discovered in the mines of Laurium, the assembly was ready to divide the windfall among citizens. Themistocles told them to throw the money at the sea instead, build 200 warships. He got the vote, he got the ships, and he got the oracle. When Athens asked Delphi how to survive, the priestess answered with a riddle. The wooden wall will not fail. The old men said it meant the palisade around the Acropolis. Themistocles said no, the wooden wall was the fleet. In late September 480 BC, in the narrow Strait of Salamis, 180 Athenian triremes, leading a Greek coalition of about 378 ships, lured 600 Persian warships into water too tight for them to maneuver. By sunset, the Persian fleet was scrap. Xerxes watched it happen from a throne on the shore. Athens had saved Greece. Now it had to rebuild. The new walls went up in months, made from whatever was available. Column drums from broken temples, tombstones from the old cemetery, statues of gods reused as bricks. Then came the long walls, linking the city to its port of Piraeus through 6 kilometers of stone corridor. The walls rose faster than any city had built them, but the real construction project had not yet begun, because the fleet that saved Greece was about to become the weapon that enslaved it.
4 years after Salamis, Athens proposed a defensive league of Greek cities, the Delian League.
A treasury on the neutral island of Delos. Every member contributed ships or silver. Then the treasury was moved to Athens. The contributions became mandatory. The standards decree arrived. Every allied city had to abandon its own coinage and use only Athenian versions, death penalty for violations. The alliance had become an empire, and at the top stood a man whose profile you would recognize instantly, but only because it was engineered that way. Pericles ruled Athens for roughly 30 years. His enemies called him Onion Head because he had a skull shaped like an elongated pear. He refused to be depicted without a Corinthian helmet. Every statue of Pericles you have ever seen shows that helmet. The first politician in history to control his own image by decree. And he had a scandal, Aspasia, a metic from Miletus. She taught rhetoric, debated Socrates as an equal, and ran a salon in a city that locked its citizen wives inside the back rooms of their houses. When enemies couldn't reach Pericles directly, they put Aspasia on trial for impiety. Pericles, the man who never showed emotion, wept openly in front of 1,500 jurors to save her. This was the man who built the Parthenon. Construction ran from 447 to 432 BC. 22,000 tons of Pentelic marble hauled 16 kilometers from the quarries. Final cost, around 470 talents of silver, enough to build hundreds of warships. The Allies watched their defense money become Athens's art project. Inside the temple stood Athena Parthenos, 12 meters high, sheathed in ivory and a full ton of removable gold plating. Designed as beauty, designed as a vault. If the city was ever besieged, the goddess could be peeled like fruit. And here is the fact most of us still get wrong. The Parthenon was not white. Archaeology proves it was painted in violent blues, blood reds, and deep ochres. The marble skin of the gods was coated in warm beeswax and olive oil, polished until the statues appeared to sweat, to glow, to live. On a hot afternoon, the deities of Athens looked oily and breathing. Above the city, gods sweated gold and oil in the sunlight. Below it, something else was happening, and nobody who walked the Acropolis wanted to think about it.
40 kilometers south of the Acropolis, the land falls into a mountain range called Laurium.
Laurium was the source of the silver that saved Athens at Salamis. It was also a mass grave with its eyes open. Around 20,000 slaves worked the mines at their peak. Most were prisoners of war, Thracians and Scythians, men whose cities had failed to pay tribute. They were taken underground in shifts of 10 hours, into tunnels under a meter high. The heat reached the level of an oven. The air ran out before the shift did. Men worked naked, chained, cutting silver-lead ore by the flickering light of oil lamps. On the surface, the smelting furnaces burned at over 800 degrees. Lead vapor rose. The slaves inhaled it. They absorbed it through their skin. They developed the complete catalog of lead poisoning, paralyzed wrists, gastric agony, psychosis, and a pale, waxy death within a few years of starting work. The Athenian writer Xenophon, student of Socrates, recommended that wealthy citizens lease slaves to the mines. His argument was financial. Annual return on investment, he calculated, around 33%. The death of the workers was an operating cost. The silver moved up the road to Athens. There it was struck into tetradrachmas, bearing the owl of Athena, the reserve currency of the Eastern Mediterranean. Every silver coin was stamped with the city's goddess and financed by men who would never see daylight again. The silver moved up, the slaves never did. And in the city above, the citizens had built the most extraordinary political experiment in human history, an experiment that would spend the next 70 years proving it could be just as cruel as the rock below.
Every morning in the Athenian agora, a block of carved stone decided who would judge your neighbors.
The claritarian, a tall slab of marble riddled with slots. Citizens inserted their bronze identity tokens. A bureaucrat poured colored dice into a tube on the side. When the dice fell, the color that emerged selected an entire row of citizens for jury duty, or dismissed them. Random, impossible to rig. Juries were enormous, 501 for serious crimes, 1,001 for political trials. Citizens were paid 3 obols a day for serving, enough to buy bread for a small family. But Athens had no public prosecutor. Any free man could file charges against anyone, and so the democracy bred its most hated parasite, the sycophants, professional accusers who would dig into the finances of wealthy medics and citizens, then offer to drop the charges for a price. They extorted an empire from the shadows. And when the courts failed, the assembly had a blunter tool: ostracism. Once a year, citizens could vote to exile anyone, no crime required, no defense permitted, for 10 years. You scratched a name onto a piece of broken pottery called an ostracon. If more than 6,000 names matched, the most voted man was gone. The most famous ostracism in history is a single anecdote. In 482 BC, during the vote against Aristides, a farmer walked up to the statesman, not recognizing him, and asked him to write the name Aristides on his ostracon because he was illiterate. Aristides asked politely, "What has this man ever done to you?" The farmer answered, "Nothing. I've never even met him. I'm just tired of hearing everyone call him the Just." Aristides wrote his own name, handed it to the farmer, and walked into exile without saying another word. Athens could exile a hero for being too just. What it would do to a man for being too honest, that takes us to the end of this story. But before we get there, we need to walk these streets, because the Athens you think you know does not exist. It never did.
Step off the Acropolis and into the streets.
The roads are not paved. They are compacted earth scattered with animal manure, broken pottery, and the runoff from uncovered drains. In summer, the mud bakes into dust that hangs in the air and coats the inside of your nose. The city smells, not like a place that failed at hygiene, but like a place that never tried. And downwind of every workshop sits the industry Athens cannot function without, the tanners. Their leather for sandals and shields and bowstrings is produced by soaking raw hides in vats of fermented human urine, dog feces, and the brains of slaughtered animals. The smell carries for a kilometer. Your lunch is a wet block of barley dough called maza, eaten with your fingers, seasoned with raw garlic and salted anchovies so cheap even a rower can afford them. Wheat bread is an import for the rich. Wine is always diluted 3 parts water to 1. Drinking wine undiluted is what barbarians do. If you are wealthy, tonight you recline in a private dining room, watching a flute girl play, while your host throws the dregs of his wine cup across the room at a target, shouting the name of his lover as the wine splatters. The game is called kotabos. The floor is always sticky. If you are ordinary, tonight you walk up the south slope of the Acropolis into the Theater of Dionysus, along with 15,000 of your neighbors. Your ticket has been paid by the state. Later this century, Euripides will stage The Trojan Women, a play about Athens' own massacre at Melos. The citizens who voted for that massacre will sit through the play, applaud politely, and within months approve the next invasion. Athens knew exactly what it was doing. At festival time, 100 bulls are killed at the altar simultaneously. The altar of Zeus at Olympia is not made of marble. It is a mound 7 meters high, built entirely from centuries of compressed bone, ash, and dried sacrificial blood. And against all of this, a short, barefoot man with a flat nose is walking through the marketplace, asking uncomfortable questions. The philosophers of Athens are already losing friends to a charge called asebeia, impiety. Anaxagoras was exiled for saying the sun was a rock. Diagoras was sentenced to death for mocking the mysteries. The barefoot man is still alive, for now. In the winter of 431 BC, the first year of the war with Sparta, Pericles stood at the public cemetery to eulogize the first Athenians to die. His words were recorded by the historian Thucydides. "Our constitution is called a democracy," Pericles said, "because power is in the hands not of a minority, but of the whole people." It was the most beautiful description of self-government ever spoken aloud. Less than 2 years later, Pericles was dead, and within a generation, Athens would betray every word of that speech.
Pericles decided Athens could not face Sparta on land. The entire rural population of Attica was evacuated behind the long walls. Over 100,000 refugees packed into a space built for a fraction of them. In the summer of 430 BC, a ship from Egypt docked at Piraeus, carrying something invisible. Thucydides survived it and wrote it down. The fever started in the head. Thirst became unbearable. Victims hurled themselves into wells that were promptly filled with corpses. The fingers and toes blackened and fell off. DNA from a mass grave at the Kerameikos cemetery points to typhoid, though scholars still debate it. Between 75,000 and 100,000 Athenians died, a third of the population. Pericles died with them in 429 BC. Into the vacuum stepped Cleon, a rich tanner who screamed on the assembly floor and gave the democracy the kind of leader a democracy gets when it stops believing in itself. In 428 BC, Mytilene rebelled. A year later, Cleon convinced the assembly to vote for genocide, kill every adult male, enslave every woman and child. The decree passed. A ship left Piraeus the next morning to deliver the order. That night, Athens could not sleep. The assembly convened at dawn and reversed the vote. A second ship was launched. The rowers, eating at their oars, caught the first ship at Mytilene's harbor mouth minutes before the killing began. 12 years later, Athens did not reach back. Melos had done nothing. It was neutral. In 416 BC, Athenian generals besieged it. The dialogue is preserved word for word in Thucydides. The envoys made no appeal to justice or to the gods or to mercy. They said, "The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must." Melos surrendered. The assembly voted to execute every adult male. Women and children were sold. There was no second ship this time. 1 year later, Athens decided to conquer Sicily. The man who sold the idea was Alcibiades, beautiful, treasonous, a ward of Pericles and a student of Socrates. The night before the fleet sailed, every sacred statue of Hermes in the city was found mutilated. Alcibiades was blamed. He deserted to Sparta and taught the Spartans how to defeat Athens. 200 ships, 40,000 men. 2 years later, it was gone. The 7,000 who surrendered at Syracuse were thrown into open-air limestone quarries and kept there for 8 months, rationed to half a pint of water a day. According to Plutarch, the only prisoners released were those who could recite long passages of Euripides from memory. Some Athenians sang their way out of hell. The empire would not recover from Sicily. In 411 BC, 2 years after Sicily, the democracy did something unthinkable. It voted itself out of existence. An oligarchic council of 400 seized power. The same assembly that had invaded Sicily voted in panic to suspend itself. The oligarchy lasted 4 months. When democracy came back, it came back traumatized, and terrifying democracies do terrifying things.
In 406 BC, a depleted Athenian navy, manned partly by slaves and medics granted emergency citizenship so they could pull the oars, won a brilliant victory off the Arginaceae Islands. 90 Spartan ships sunk, the kind of victory Athens desperately needed. Then, a storm arrived. The Athenian admirals prioritized pursuit over rescue. Hundreds of their own sailors drowned, clinging to debris. The city exploded in grief. The assembly tried all 8 of the victorious generals collectively in a single day in direct violation of Athenian law. 6 were executed. Among them was Pericles the Younger, the son of Pericles and Aspasia. One man in the assembly voted against the illegal trial, a veteran hoplite who had fought at Potidaea, Delium, and Amphipolis, known for his flat nose, his bare feet, and his questions. His name was Socrates. By chance, he was serving that day as the presiding officer of the assembly. He refused to put the motion to a vote. The assembly forced it through anyway. Athens had just executed the men who had won the war for her. 10 months later, the Spartan admiral Lysander caught the rest of the Athenian fleet beached at Aegospotami. He captured 170 triremes in a single afternoon. 3,000 Athenian sailors were executed on the spot. In the spring of 404 BC, Athens surrendered unconditionally. Thebes and Corinth demanded the total destruction of the city, the same fate Athens had imposed on Milos. Sparta refused. Athens had saved Greece at Salamis, and Sparta, of all cities, remembered. The long walls came down. The fleet was reduced to 12 ships. The 30 tyrants, an oligarchy imposed by Sparta and led by Critias, the uncle of Plato, executed 1,500 citizens in 8 months before a guerrilla army under Thrasybulus drove them out and restored the democracy in 403 BC. The same year the walls fell, Alcibiades was murdered in Phrygia, shot full of arrows trying to escape a burning house. The most brilliant traitor of the age died as he had lived, running from the last side that had trusted him. Democracy was restored. The empire would not. But this story has one more moment, the one that would define Athens forever. In 399 BC, at 70 years old, the hoplite who had walked out of the slaughter at Delium with a calm that even Alcibiades could not fake, took trial for corrupting the youth and introducing new gods. 501 jurors, selected that morning by the Kleroterion, the same machine that had built the democracy. 280 to 221, guilty. A smaller margin voted for death. Socrates could have fled. His friends arranged it. He refused. He drank the hemlock in a cell at the end of the afternoon. His last words, recorded by Plato, were a reminder to pay a debt, a rooster owed to the god of medicine. He died lucid and quiet. The same people who had built a wooden wall to stop Persia had built a wall of fear high enough to kill their own philosopher. Athens lost the war. Athens lost the empire. Athens lost Socrates. And yet, everything we mean when we say Western civilization, the theater, the philosophy, the idea that ordinary citizens can argue with each other and govern themselves through that argument, all of it came from the most disastrous 80 years in Greek history. This cracked, cruel, brilliant democracy built the intellectual architecture that every constitution on earth still stands on. Sparta won the war. Athens won the argument. More than 2,400 years ago, Athens voted in panic to kill an entire city and then sent a second ship across the sea to cancel a genocide it had regretted by morning. The first ship carried the execution order. The second carried the mercy. The rowers ate at their oars and rowed day and night through open water. They arrived in Mytilene's harbor minutes before the killing began.
Athens fell by voting for its own doom.